Greetings and salutations, everyone. I am, as always, darthdevious, and now we are concluding our look at Middle-earth history. And I figured, even though he's not 100% complete, I would bring out one of my older Lord of the Rings figures, and this is, of course, the Dark Lord himself, Sauron. And this figure dates back to 2001, when the first movie came out. And he is rather large. He really is. I'll show you how large in a little bit. But I mean, you just look at how well detailed his armor is. Like in his face. You know, down to the individual joints in his gauntlets and things like that. His mace is a little droopy, but you know, like I said, this thing's, 13 years old or something like that. 12 years old. There's nice patterns all in the armor. Really nicely detailed. Cloth cape on the back here. You know, this is really cool. But like I said, he's big. The only thing he's missing is, if you can see here, he used to have fingers that would plug in there and the one ring. And, you would pop him out just to simulate him getting his fingers cut off. I lost those back in roughly 2003, I think, just before I moved down to Delaware from New York. So, yeah, they're long gone. He stands okay. He's kind of a little top-heavy, but still, he's got decent articulation. Nice knee. Pivot in his foot. Does have a swivel in his arms. Swivels in his wrists. Head's on a bit of a ball joint. He has a waist, though it's limited. That's pretty much it. He does have... the batteries are dying. And I don't know if you can see it. His eyes glow, but... He speaks a lot of the black speech of Mordor, so a lot of it doesn't make sense. But the only thing you can understand is when he says, "I see you." But again, the batteries are dying on him. 12, 13 years old. Don't expect him to last forever. I suppose I should change him. I'll get around to it. I actually gave this to my oldest son, and I'm borrowing it for the review. But, yeah, his mace is pretty decent. It's, like I said, it's floppy. I've tried, using hot water to bend it back, but, it is what it is. I just tend to leave it like this. Now, I'll show you how big this guy actually is, because he is. He's up there in size. Here's Bilbo. Here is Thorin. Thorin doesn't even come up to his waist. Thorin's sword's falling out. There we go. Thorin doesn't even come up to his waist. And now you look. We take Gandalf. We'll take off his hat so you get a better idea. Gandalf comes up to his waist. So you see, he is a massive figure. He really is. I don't know if he was in scale with the other figures from the Toy Biz line. I think he's a little too large for them, but he may have been. I don't remember. Like I said, I've had this thing for years. So, I'm going to end that part of the review, and we're going to go... I'll just leave these guys on screen like I've been doing. And we'll go into the last part of Middle-earth history, which pretty much is a rundown of most of what happened in the Third Age. I'm only hitting the highlights because there's a lot. And I'm actually going to end it just before Bilbo sets out on his quest with the dwarves, because I don't want to spoil that stuff in case anybody hasn't read the books or things like that. So, with that, we'll get right on to Middle-earth history. Okay, Middle-earth History, Part 6. The Kingdom of Angmar and the Major Events of the Third Age. So, early in the Third Age, Arnor and Gondor, they weren't having that good of a time. In the year 861 of the Third Age, the king of Arnor, Erebor, he dies. And when he does, there's a lot of infighting, and Arnor is actually split into three separate kingdoms: Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rhudaur. Sometime about this time, the Black Númenóreans besiege Umbar, try to take it back, because they had fled when Erendil and his sons came from Númenor when Númenor was destroyed, and now they were trying to take it back. At first they fail. Eventually they will conquer it, and they will become known as the Corsairs of Umbar. Shortly after the wizards arrive, right around the year 1050, the first of the hobbits start making their way over the Misty Mountains into Erebor. Now, about 300 years later, the Nazgûl begin to reappear. And it's shortly thereafter, in the northern part of Erebor, near the western edge of the Misty Mountains in the north, that the Kingdom of Angmar is established. Now, Angmar is led by the Witch King, who, those who've seen Lord of the Rings know who the Witch King is. It's the Lord of the Nazgûl. So basically, the Nazgûl set up their own kingdom in Middle-earth, and they're pretty much going to attack the three kingdoms that split off from Arnor. Rhudaur is the first to fall, and eventually Cardolan will fall. And in the year 1409 of the Third Age, the great watchtower of Amin-Sul on top of Weathertop is burned and ruined, and that's why you see in Lord of the Rings movies, you see it all destroyed. That's when that happened. Over in Gondor around the same time, their current king, Romendasil II, he has the Argonath constructed, the two great statues at the just before the falls of Rauros. This is to depict the northernmost border of Gondor at that time, because by the time you get the Fellowship of the Ring, Gondor's borders have been significantly shrunk. But at that time, the Argonath, which the two giant statues actually represent Isildur and Anarion, they that was their northernmost border. About this time, though, a civil war breaks out in Gondor, known as the Kinstrife, and it's led by Castamir the Usurper. And for a while, he does gain control of the throne of Gondor, though it is eventually taken back. But it was during this civil war that Osgiliath was heavily damaged. I mean, heavily damaged. And they started to back away from living there, and it was, it pretty much remained that way. And then when you get to the year 1636 of the Third Age, a great plague spread across most of Middle-earth, killing many. And Osgiliath at that point in time was just abandoned, because so many had just died from the plague, and there was just no point in keeping it. And the seat of power was then moved to Minas Arnor in the Pelennor Fields. Also around 1600, two hobbit brothers from the Fallowhide type of hobbits. If you don't know about hobbits, there are three main type of hobbits. There's Harfoots, which is basically what Bilbo is. Fallowhides, who are a little bit tougher, bigger, and Stores, which are the biggest of all. And Stores are actually the where Smeagol comes from. Those were his people. The Stores pretty much stayed on the other side of the Misty Mountains. Anyway, two Fallowhide brothers crossed the river Brandywine, which will be known in the future as the Brandywine, and they established the Shire. However, because of the timing of this, they were still under the shadow of Angmar and always under threat from attack from the Witch King and his followers. Bear with me, this is a long one. I've got a lot to go over. Gondor, after the Great Plague passes, slowly rebuilds its strength. It takes him a while. Eventually, Angmar conquers the last of the three kingdoms, Arthedain. And what was all once the kingdom of Arnor now belongs to Angmar. Finally, in the year 1975, not 1975 our time, 1975, the Third Age of Middle-earth, Gondor finally gets its forces together, and along with some elves, other free peoples, including Hobbit archers, a whole host of Hobbit archers actually march with Gondor at this time. They go to reclaim Arthedain and to take back, most of the lands up there and try to defeat Angmar. The Battle of Fornost breaks out. Now, Fornost was the chiefest city in Arthedain. And by the end of the battle, the Witch King is defeated. He and his Nazgul, they flee back to Mordor. And the kingdom of Angmar itself is overrun and destroyed, ending that terror. Now, during the reign of Angmar, the kingdom of Angmar, Sauron, who had fled from Dol Guldur pretty much as soon as Gandalf had arrived on Middle-earth and went there, he had been resting in Angmar all this time. So when Angmar was overrun, he returned to Dol Guldur. And Gandalf again chased him out, and he fled to the Far East to recover some more. He would keep coming back, but right now he was still too weak. Now, 5 years after the Battle of Fornost, in the mines of Moria, this is when the dwarves dug in too deep into Moria, and they awoke the Balrog that was hiding underneath. And many dwarves were killed by the awakening of the Balrog, and it became known as Doran's Bane. Within a year, Moria would be abandoned. And a lot of the dwarves from Moria would wander around for quite some time. And it was about 18 years after abandoning Moria that Thrain I established the kingdom of Erebor underneath the Lonely Mountain near the human city of Dale. Now, in the year 2000 of the Third Age, the Nazgul, who had been recovering from their loss in Angmar, decided to attack and besiege Minas Ithil. Basically, this came without warning because the watchtower Cirith Ungol had been abandoned during the Great Plague because there just were not enough men in Gondor to man it. And Cirith Ungol itself had become a stronghold for orcs. And using that as a staging point, the Nazgul and the orcs attacked Minas Ithil, and after a 2-year siege, they conquered it. And it was then that the city was renamed Minas Morgul, or the City of the Dead. Minas Arnor is shortly thereafter renamed Minas Tirith, the Tower of the Guard. Now, at this time, the king of Gondor is known as Erebor. Shortly after Minas Morgul is established, the Witch King calls him out, challenges him. Erebor doesn't do it. He ignores him. He's got his own things to worry about. A few years go by, and by the time you get to 2050 of the Third Age, the Witch King again challenges him. This time, Erebor accepts the challenge. He leaves his steward in charge of Gondor, and he rides on his own all the way to Minas Morgul, and is never seen again. This ends the reign of the kings in Gondor. All the survivors that had been from the Kingdom of Arnor, the Númenórean survivors, now known as the Dúnedain, decide they're not going to establish kingdoms, they're not going to try and retake Gondor. They pretty much go into hiding because they know the forces that are loyal to Sauron and the Nazgûl and everything else are out to destroy them because of what they did in the Second Age. So this is when they become the Rangers. And they hide out, because their numbers are dwindling. In the year 2063, Sauron again returns to Dol Guldur, only to be driven out by Gandalf once again. This is where the Watchful Peace begins, which lasts almost exactly 400 years. Just before the Watchful Peace comes to an end, near the Gladden Fields, Smeagol is born. There's no exact date. It's sometime around 2460. Or, I'm sorry, 2430. Forgive me. Yes, I do have all this written down. I can't do this all from memory. It's a lot. Sauron returns to Dol Guldur again in 2460. This time he's not driven out by Gandalf. He's already gained enough power where he doesn't fear Gandalf at this point. So he's there. And he's pretty much there until near the end of the Third Age, which right about the time when Bilbo's on his quest to Erebor with the dwarves, that Gandalf, along with Sauron, Radagast, and a bunch of others, they do eventually. It takes all of them to drive him out this last time. By then, he's gained enough power where he returns to Mordor and openly declares himself in Mordor, right around the same time Bilbo gets home from his adventure. So, 3 years after Sauron returns to Dol Guldur, Smeagol is out fishing with his cousin Déagol. Déagol falls in the river and finds the One Ring. As you know, the One Ring immediately calls to Smeagol, who kills Déagol and takes it. As time goes by, he becomes a little more twisted and starts making weird noises, which causes other hobbits to call him Gollum. He eventually gets so twisted he can't stand the sun, and he flees under the Misty Mountains with the One Ring, where it stays for nearly 500 years. In the year 2747 of the Third Age, a band of orcs from the Misty Mountains decide they're going to attack the Shire. Why? No one knows. But a force of hobbits is able to beat them back. They are led by Bandobras Bulror Took, who is an ancestor of Bilbo's, and he's also the largest hobbit that has ever lived. He was so large he could ride on a horse. It is said that he himself chopped off the head of the orc chief, causing the head to roll and go into a rabbit hole, thus inventing the game of golf. That is actually in the Lord of the Rings books and things like that. That wasn't just something that was thrown into The Hobbit as a joke. That actually is part of Middle-earth history. Shortly thereafter, in the year 2759, Saruman decides that a wizard of his stature needs, a place to live. So he decides to settle into the Tower of Orthanc in Isengard. In the year 2770 of the Third Age, we're getting towards the end of the Third Age here, the dragon Smaug, attracted to all the gold that the dwarves in Erebor have, mined all these years, attacks Dale, and then attacks Erebor, driving the dwarves out and claiming the treasure for himself. 20 years later, the last king of Erebor, Thror, decides that he wants to retake Moria. He enters Moria and is quickly beheaded by Azog the White Orc. 9 years later, the forces of the dwarves attack Moria in the Battle of Zanulbazar. Say that 3 times fast. And this is, outside of the east gate of Moria, just outside of Lothlorien. Pretty much where the Fellowship of the Ring runs out after they escape from Moria in Fellowship of the Ring. It's during this battle that Thorin gets his name Oakenshield, as he uses an oak branch to shield himself when his original shield is destroyed. The battle is successful. The dwarves do defeat the orcs. However, so many dwarves are killed that it's a hollow victory and they still can't retake Moria. Thrain, the second Thrain of dwarf genealogy, he decides to take the remainder of dwarves and settle in the Blue Mountains. The dwarves from Erebor. And they settle in the Blue Mountains. This is in the year 2802. Now, in the year 2845, Thrain is captured by orcs, and he is actually taken to the Tower of Dol Guldur. 5 years after his imprisonment, Gandalf enters the fortress and finds him. Thrain is dying. As he lay dying, he gives Gandalf the map and key to give to Thorin, his son, so that Thorin can retake Erebor. Almost done. In the year 2930, Arathorn II becomes the new chief of the Dunedain, following the death of his father. The following year, his wife Gilraen gives birth to a son, Aragorn. 2 years later, Arathorn is on a hunting expedition to drive out orcs from their territory because they were getting too close to one of their secret hiding areas. He's killed. Elrond's 2 sons, his twin sons, Elrohir and Elladan, take Gilraen and Aragorn to Rivendell, where Aragorn is raised. Now, Aragorn's name is changed to Estelle to protect himself until he grows up. Gandalf, at around all this time, has had Sauron on his mind a lot. He's worried about his power coming back. He's worried that he knows that he's been hiding out as the necromancer in Dol Guldur. He also started to worry that if Sauron openly declared himself, because he still had enough power to be a threat even without the ring, if he openly declared himself, there was a real possibility that the dragon Smaug would join him. If that happened, there'd be a lot of destruction caused by Smaug, because a dragon is a hard thing to kill, and they can cause great amount of damage in a short amount of time, especially a flying fire drake like Smaug. Gandalf decides Smaug has to be dealt with. He has the map and the key to Erebor. So in March of 2941 of the Third Age, Gandalf has a meeting with Thorin Oakenshield in Bree at the Inn of the Prancing Pony. It is here that the quest to retake Erebor is born. Thorin is able to gather 12 dwarves to follow him, but they ask for a 14th member of their party to get rid of the stigma of being an unlucky number of 13. Because Gandalf wasn't going to be a full-time member of the party, and they knew that. As many know, Gandalf chooses Bilbo Baggins of the Shire. They set out on the quest. Yada yada yada. Bilbo finds the ring. I'm not going to spoil everything else that happens in case nobody's even either read The Hobbit or seen any of the movies, even the animated movie, all you need to know is that eventually Bilbo returns home with the ring. The ring is passed to Frodo, and Frodo goes on his quest to destroy it in Mount Doom many years later. So that's it. That's going to be where I'm going to end these. Because everything else is well documented in the Lord of the Rings books and in the Hobbit book and in the movies and things like that. So I want to thank everyone for watching these. These were a lot of work to do, though it probably doesn't seem like it because I spent a lot of time just talking. But they really were. There was a lot of research involved, a lot of time finding images to go with what I was talking about, especially for stuff in the First and Second Age, because it's hard to find stuff like that. Thankfully, because of Peter Jackson's movies, stuff in the Third Age is easy to find. So yeah, I may do one more video in the future, a seventh video, that I'll talk about the legacy of Tolkien's work and how aspects of it have, come across in other genres and things like that. But that's going to be it. If you're interested in really knowing a lot more about this stuff, I urge you to look it up. Read the books. Read the Silmarillion. Read The Children of Húrin, which was a book that just recently came out. You'll learn more about the history of Middle Earth from these sources than you will from me. I just skimmed over the surface and left out a lot of names, a lot of places, things like that. I just hit the highlights. So yeah, I thank you all for joining me in this. It's been fun. It's been a long 6-week journey with this, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm going to put these all into a playlist to make it a little easier to watch in the future. So yeah, so that's going to be it. You guys all be good. I'll send the Dark Lord after you if you're not. He may not have the ring, but he's still powerful. See you later.